text came at 6:14 in the morning. Amara Osei was already awake. She was always already awake before the rest of Savannah decided to exist. Coffee made, second cup cooling. The French doors of her apartment pushed open to let in the early June air that smelled like jasmine and warm concrete and the particular stillness of a city that hadn't started lying to itself yet. She was reviewing a contract on her laptop. Small corporate relocation project. Clean work. Straightforward. The kind of work she had spent 2 years deliberately choosing because it was the opposite of everything her life used to be. Her phone buzzed. She didn't look at it immediately. She had a rule about that. Mornings belonged to her. The rest of the day could have whatever it needed. But the first hour was hers and she protected it the way she protected everything that mattered. Quietly, completely, without negotiation. She finished the paragraph she was reading. Then she picked up the phone. The message was from a number she didn't recognize. Chicago area code. 3 words. Shin Woo-jin is dead. Amara set the coffee cup down. She read it again. Then she sat very still for a long moment in the early Savannah morning with the jasmine coming through the open doors and the city waking up around her, and she felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in 2 years shift underneath her chest like a fault line that had been holding and had just decided it was done holding. She did not respond to the message. She closed her laptop. She went to her bedroom closet, reached to the very back of the top shelf, and pulled down a small gray box she had not opened since the night she drove out of Chicago in the rain with 2 suitcases and a decision she had made alone and had been living with alone ever since. She sat on the edge of her bed. She opened the box. Inside, a burner phone, still charged because she replaced the battery every 6 months, the way you maintain something you hope you'll never need. A folded piece of paper with 4 names on it, one of which was now dead. A photograph she should have thrown away and hadn't. And at the bottom, a USB drive no larger than her thumb, holding the only copy of something that had cost her everything she had built and everything she had almost had. She looked at the photograph for exactly as long as she allowed herself. Then she put everything back in the box. She went to the kitchen. She poured the cold coffee down the drain. She made a fresh cup. And while the coffee brewed, she stood at the window looking out at the street below and thought about the fact that Shin Woo-jin being dead meant one of 2 things. Either the situation had resolved itself, or it had just become significantly more dangerous. She was almost certain it was the second one. She was right. What you need to understand about Amara Osei before any of this makes sense is that she was not a woman who made impulsive decisions. She was not a woman who stumbled into things. Every move she made was deliberate, considered, arrived at through a process of analysis so thorough it sometimes looked, from the outside, like calm. It was not calm. It was discipline. There is a difference. She had grown up in Accra until she was 9, then Atlanta until she was 18, raised by her father, Emmanuel Osei, a civil engineer who had taught her 2 things above everything else. First, the structure underneath a thing is always more important than the surface. Second, the most dangerous position you can be in is one where someone else controls the information. She had her father's precision and something else entirely her own, the ability to walk into any environment, read it completely, and adapt without losing herself in the process. It made her exceptional at her work. It had also, 2 years ago, made her the wrong person to be standing in the wrong corridor at the wrong moment. She graduated top of her program. She moved through 3 firms in 4 years, each one more demanding than the last, each one teaching her something the previous one couldn't. By the time the Kong Group opportunity crossed her desk, she was 26 years old, sharper than most people twice her age, and completely certain she could handle whatever the role required. She was right about her capability. She was wrong about what the role would cost her. The Kong Group occupied the top 6 floors of a building on Michigan Avenue that looked, from the outside, like money that had decided it no longer needed to announce itself. Amara arrived on a Monday morning in September wearing charcoal gray and the expression of someone who had already done their homework. She had read everything publicly available about Kong Joon-ho. Forbes profile, 3 years old. Architectural Digest feature on the Chicago penthouse, 2 years old. A brief mention in a Korean business journal about his family's transition from first-generation construction money into private equity and real estate. What the public record did not tell her, what no public record ever tells you about men like Kong Joon-ho, was what it actually felt like to be in the same room with him. She found out at 9:07 on her first morning. He came into the executive floor the way she would learn he always did, without announcement, without performance, moving through space as if he had already accounted for everything in it. He was 32. The photographs had not been inaccurate. They had simply failed to capture the quality of his attention. He looked at people the way architects look at buildings, like he was already calculating the load-bearing walls. He looked at her once, briefly, the way he looked at everything when he was deciding what category it belonged in. Then he went to his office and she went to her desk, and for 3 hours they worked in parallel silence that was somehow more communicative than most conversations she'd had. At noon he came to the doorway of his office. "Your predecessor scheduled standing lunch meetings with 4 department heads every Monday," he said. "Cancel them." She looked up. "They're already canceled. I reviewed the last 6 months of minutes this weekend. Nothing actionable has come out of them. I've replaced them with a shared briefing document they update by 9 every Monday morning. You get the same information in 4 minutes instead of 40. A pause. "You did that before your first day," he said. "It was the weekend," she said. "I wasn't doing anything else." Something moved in his expression. Not quite a smile. Something more careful than that. He went back to his office. She went back to her screen. That was how it started. Not with drama. Not with a moment. With competence meeting competence and recognizing itself. The first month she learned his patterns. He arrived early, left late, ate at his desk more often than not, and had the rare and valuable quality of saying exactly what he meant without decoration. He did not waste her time. She did not waste his. They operated with an efficiency that felt almost like a language, abbreviated, precise, understood by both without explanation. She learned the business. She learned the staff. She learned who in the organization was reliable and who was performing reliability, which is a different thing entirely. And she learned Shin Woo-jin. He was Junho's second in command. 38. Compact, watchful, with the kind of stillness that isn't peace but something closer to controlled readiness. He had been with the Kong family for 11 years, longer than some of the executives, long enough that his loyalty had calcified into something that looked like devotion but functioned. Amara would eventually understand, as its own form of ownership. He watched her from the beginning, not with hostility exactly, with the specific attention of a man cataloging a variable he hadn't yet decided how to classify. She filed him. She was careful around him. She did not underestimate him. She should have been afraid of him sooner than she was. 2 months in, on a Thursday evening when the floor was nearly empty, Amara was cross-referencing vendor contracts when she noticed something in the payment ledger that didn't belong. It wasn't dramatic. It never is with the things that change your life. It was a single line item. A transfer. $47,000 from an internal operational account to an external LLC she didn't recognize. The LLC name was clean enough, Pacific Northwest Consulting Group, but when she ran it through the standard verification process she used for all vendor payments, it returned nothing. No website. No registered agent on record in the state it was supposedly incorporated in. No corresponding invoice in the system. She almost flagged it the way she flagged everything. Direct note to Junho, clean and professional. She hesitated. Not because of fear. Because of her father's voice in her head. The structure underneath a thing is always more important than the surface. She pulled the last 18 months of ledger data instead. The transfer wasn't singular. It was a pattern. 47,000 here, 62,000 there. Once, 8 months ago, $240,000 in a single movement, authorized after midnight on a Saturday, logged under a user ID she didn't recognize. Not Junho's ID. She knew his authorization codes. Someone else's. She sat with that information for a long time. Then she did 2 things. She documented everything she found in a clean summary file. And before she closed the original ledger, she transferred the full data to a USB drive, locked it and put it in her bag. She told herself it was precautionary. She told herself she would probably never need it. She brought the summary to Junho the next morning, set it on his desk, watched his face as he read it. He read it twice. He looked up. Where did this come from? He said. Routine audit. I run them monthly. His expression was unreadable in the way it got when he was thinking faster than he was letting on. Is there another copy? That's the only one, she said. She did not look away when she said it. She had learned that the most convincing lies are the ones delivered with the steadiest eye contact. He nodded slowly. Leave it with me. She went back to her desk. She did not think about the USB drive in her bag. Not then. If you're watching this and something about Amara already feels familiar, the way she moves, the way she thinks, the way she protects herself with information because the world didn't always offer her other options, then you already understand what this channel is about. We tell stories about women who are not waiting to be rescued. Women who make hard decisions alone and live inside those decisions with full dignity. If that's the kind of story you came here for, you are in exactly the right place. Hit the like button right now if Amara has you. And subscribe if you haven't yet, because this story is just getting started and you do not want to miss what's coming. We show up every single week. We will not let you down. It was a Wednesday night in November. 11 weeks into the role. 6 weeks, though she did not yet know it, before everything ended. She had stayed late to prepare a due diligence package for a property acquisition Junho was considering in Atlanta. The floor was empty. The cleaners had come and gone. The building had the specific quality of silence that only exists in places built for large numbers of people when all those people have left. She was at her desk. Junho was in his office. She could see the light under his door. At 10:47, she heard voices in the corridor outside the main entrance. Not loud. Controlled, the way voices are when the people using them are accustomed to being private. She heard Shin Woo-jin. She heard a second voice she didn't recognize. Older. Flat effect. The voice of someone who had long since stopped needing to perform authority because they simply had it. She heard a third voice. Also unfamiliar. Younger, tighter, the voice of someone who was there because they'd been told to be and was trying not to show that they were afraid. She should have stayed at her desk. She got up. Not recklessly. Carefully, quietly. The way her father had taught her to move through situations she didn't yet fully understand. She went to the small kitchen adjacent to the corridor, which had a frosted glass panel that looked out toward the side meeting room. She didn't push the door open. She looked through the glass. Shin Woo-jin was standing with 2 men she had never seen. Between them, seated at the conference table, was a fourth man. Young, early 30s, dressed like someone who worked in finance but was sweating in a way that finance didn't usually produce. She couldn't hear the words clearly through the glass. She didn't need to. She understood the geometry of the room. She understood what the posture of the three standing men meant in relation to the seated one. She understood that the seated man was not there by choice. She understood that what she was looking at was not a late business meeting. She stood very still behind the frosted glass for 40 seconds. Then she went back to her desk. She sat down. She opened her document and stared at it without reading a single word. At 11:23 the corridor went quiet. At 11:31 Jun-ho came out of his office. He looked at her. She looked at him. His expression was the same as it always was. Composed, unreadable to most people, not entirely unreadable to her. "You should go home," he said. "It's late." She saved her document. She picked up her bag, which had the USB drive in the front pocket. She stood up. "Jun-ho," she said. He looked at her. She almost said it. She almost asked directly. She had spent her entire professional life asking direct questions and getting direct answers, and she had built herself on the belief that clarity was always better than comfortable silence. She said, "I'll have the Atlanta package on your desk by 7. He held her gaze for a moment. Something in his expression shifted almost imperceptibly, the way a door moves slightly when air pressure changes on the other side of it. "Go home, Amara," he said. Quietly, she went. She sat in her car in the parking structure for 9 minutes before she started the engine. She was thinking about the USB drive. She was thinking about the pattern of payments. She was thinking about the man in the conference room and the way the other three had been standing. She was thinking about the line between knowing something and being responsible for what you know. She drove home. She did not sleep well. She did not tell Jun-ho what she had seen. This was the decision that would cost her everything. Not because it was wrong, because Shin Woo-jin saw her come out of that kitchen. 3 days later, Amara arrived at the office at 8 to find Shin Woo-jin already there, which was unusual. He was standing in the outer office, not at anyone's desk, just standing. The way he stood when he wanted you to understand that the space belonged to him. He waited until the elevator doors closed behind her. Then he said, "Take a walk with me." It wasn't a request. They went to the small conference room at the end of the corridor, the one without windows into the main floor. He closed the door. He didn't sit. Neither did she. He looked at her for a long moment before he spoke. The look of a man who has already made a decision and is now simply informing you of it. "You're very good at your job," he said. "Jun-ho thinks highly of you. I want you to understand that I'm saying what I'm about to say with that clearly established." She waited. "You were in the kitchen on Wednesday night," he said. She kept her face neutral. "I was getting water." "The frosted panel," he said. "You stood there for 40 seconds. I clocked it." She said nothing. "What you saw," he said, "was not connected to Jun-ho. What you saw was a separate matter entirely. A family matter. One that has been handled." He paused. "What I need to know is whether you have anything that could become a problem." She understood he was asking about more than Wednesday night. He was asking about the audit, about the USB drive, about everything she had found and everything she hadn't said. She looked at him steadily. "I have nothing," she said. "I'm an assistant. I process what I'm given and I move on." He studied her. Then he said, "Good. Because if you did have something, the situation would be very simple. You would leave quietly. You would go somewhere far from here and you would build a good life and nothing would follow you. Or you would stay, and the conversation we'd have to have next would be considerably less comfortable than this one." He let that sit for a moment. "The Kong family," he said carefully, "takes care of people who take care of them. And it removes problems that it cannot take care of." He looked at her. "I don't think you're a problem, Amara. I think you're an intelligent woman who understands the value of discretion. Am I right?" She held his gaze. "You're right," she said. He nodded. Then he opened the door and left. She stood in that conference room for a long time after he was gone. She thought about Jun-ho. She thought about the months of late evenings and direct conversations and the specific quality of being known by someone who didn't give that easily. She thought about what she felt when she was with him, which was the thing she had been most careful not to name even to herself. She thought about what she had seen through that frosted glass. She thought about the USB drive. And she thought about her father's second rule. The most dangerous position you can be in is one where someone else controls the information. She was not going to give Shin Woo-jin that position. She was not going to give anyone that position. She made her decision. She went back to her desk. She worked the rest of the day with perfect composure. She brought Jun-ho his 3 p.m. briefing. She answered his questions clearly. She did not look at him with anything other than professional attention. She did not tell him about the conversation with Shin Woo-jin. She did not tell him what she had decided. That night she went home and she booked a one-way flight to Savannah. If you felt that, if you felt the weight of what she just chose, not running, not betraying, just leaving quietly to protect both of them, then I need you to pause for 1 second. Comment below right now. Tell me, did Amara make the right decision? Should she have told Jun-ho everything? Because the comment section on this one is going to be a conversation and I want you in it. Drop your thoughts right now. And if you haven't subscribed yet, Do it before the next part, because what's coming is the part this whole story has been building toward. Savannah received her the way it receives everyone who comes back to it, having left something important somewhere else, without judgment, without questions, with the particular grace of a city that has seen enough to know that most arrivals are also departures in disguise. She stayed with her aunt for 6 weeks. Then she found the apartment on Jones Street, 3rd floor, French doors, Jasmine in the courtyard. She got her business registration in order. She took small contracts at first, the kind that didn't require her name to be attached to anything visible. She was careful. She was always careful. The gray box went to the back of the closet. The USB drive went inside it. She told herself she was moving forward. She told herself the information was insurance she would never need to use. She told herself that what she had felt in those Chicago late evenings was something she could metabolize and release the way you release anything that was real but is now over. She was partially right. The business she built, Osei Consulting, corporate logistics and relocation services, grew steadily because she was genuinely exceptional at it and because she worked with the focused intensity of someone who needed the work to be enough. In 18 months she had 4 corporate clients, 2 referrals pending, and a reputation in the Savannah business community as the person you called when you needed something complicated handled cleanly. She had a life, a real one, friends, dinners, a running route along the river, a standing Sunday call with her father in Atlanta who asked careful questions and listened to her answers with the attention of a man who knew his daughter better than she sometimes wanted to be known. She had almost convinced herself she was done with Chicago. Then, 8 months after she left, a man knocked on her apartment door on a Tuesday evening. She looked through the peephole. She didn't recognize him. Late 30s, Korean suit jacket, no tie. Not Shin Woo-jin. Not anyone from the organization she recognized. She did not open the door immediately. She stood with her hand flat against it. "Who are you?" she said. "My name is Park Hyun," he said. "I work for Kang Joon-ho." He paused. "I'm not here on his behalf. I'm here on mine. I need to talk to you about Shin Woo-jin." She stood very still. "What about him?" she said. "He's been moving money," Park Hyun said. "Not for the organization. Against it. Against Joon-ho specifically. And the trail leads somewhere that's going to destroy someone who doesn't deserve to be destroyed." He paused again. "You have something on that drive that proves it wasn't Joon-ho." She didn't answer. "I know about the audit," he said. "I know about the USB. Woo-jin told Joon-ho you took nothing. But he told someone else a different story. He's been holding your name in reserve. If this goes wrong, if the investigation reaches Kang Group, you're the name he's going to give them." The Jasmine from the courtyard came through the crack under the door. She stood there for a very long time. Then she opened the door. Park Hyun was inside her apartment for 40 minutes. He told her what he knew. She told him nothing she wasn't certain of. She gave him no access to the drive. But she listened. And what she listened to rearranged things she had believed to be settled. The financial irregularities she had found, the pattern of payments to shell LLCs, the after-midnight transfers, were not the Kang family's operation. They were Shin Woo-jin's. A parallel structure he had been building for 4 years, siphoning from the organization's legitimate real estate revenues, routing it through entities that left a carefully constructed paper trail pointing away from him and toward the executive level. Toward Joon-ho. Toward her if needed. She was his emergency exit. Her name, her access codes, her audit. All of it could be reframed in a way that made her look like the architect if the right person needed a story that held. She asked Park Hyun why he was bringing this to her instead of Joon-ho directly. "Because Joon-ho doesn't know the scope of it yet," Park Hyun said. "And when he finds out, Woo-jin will move fast. He'll use whatever he has." He paused. "You are the cleanest piece of evidence that it wasn't Joon-ho. The timestamps on that drive, the authorization codes, none of them are Joon-ho's. If this goes to a federal investigation and you're not there to produce that drive, the narrative Woo-jin has prepared is the one that survives." She asked him what he wanted her to do. "Nothing yet," he said. "Just know. And be ready." She asked him one more question. "Does Joon-ho know I'm in Savannah?" Park Hyun looked at her. He looked for a long moment. "He knows you're in the South," he said carefully. "He hasn't looked harder than that." She understood what that meant. She understood that Joon-ho had given her the distance she had taken. That he had not hunted for her the way a man who believed she betrayed him would hunt. That somewhere in his version of events, he had absorbed her absence and left it alone. She didn't know whether that broke her heart or healed something. She thought about it for a long time after Park Hyun left. She put the gray box back on the shelf. She went back to work. She waited. For 2 years she waited. For 2 years she carried the drive and the knowledge and the weight of a decision she had made alone in a corridor outside a conference room in Chicago. For 2 years she built her life in Savannah and told herself that if the situation resolved itself she would never have to make another choice. And then, on a Tuesday morning in June, with Jasmine coming through the French doors and coffee cooling on the counter, her phone showed a Chicago area code and 3 words. Shin Woo-jin is dead. And the waiting was over. By the time Amara had made her second cup of coffee that morning, she had received 2 more messages from the unknown number. The second said, "It wasn't natural causes." The third said, "He's already looking for you." She put the phone face down on the counter. She stood at the window. She ran the situation the way her father had taught her to run any structural problem. Start with what you know with certainty. Build out from there. Don't move until you understand what you're standing on. What she knew, Shin Woo-jin was dead. The manner of his death was not natural. Someone, Park Hyun, she assumed, though she couldn't confirm the number, believed Jun-ho was now moving, looking for her, and whoever had sent these messages wanted her to know before he arrived. What she didn't know, whether Jun-ho was looking for her as a threat or as something else, whether the 2 years of distance had calcified his understanding of her leaving into betrayal or into something more complicated, whether the drive she had was still relevant now that Woo-jin was gone, whether he was already in Savannah. She picked up the phone. She called Park Hyun's number, the one he had given her 2 years ago, the one she had saved under a name that meant nothing to anyone who might see her phone. It rang 4 times. Then, the number you have reached is no longer in service. She set the phone down. She went to the bedroom. She pulled the gray box from the shelf. She took out the burner phone, powered it on, waited for it to connect. She looked at the paper with 4 names. 1 was already crossed off. She looked at the remaining 3. She made a decision. She had 24 hours, maybe less. She was going to use them. She was in the middle of transferring key files from the USB to a secure encrypted server she maintained for exactly this kind of contingency when she heard the knock. Not the buzzer from the street. The knock, which meant someone had come through the building's front entrance, which meant either a resident had let them in or they hadn't needed letting in at all. She closed the laptop. She stood up slowly. The knock came again. Not aggressive. Controlled. The knock of someone who was certain you were inside and was willing to wait. She went to the door. She looked through the peephole. And the world she had spent 2 years building at a careful, deliberate distance from her past contracted to the size of that small glass circle. Kang Jun-ho was standing in her corridor. He was wearing a dark jacket, no tie. He looked exactly like himself. He looked like the 2 years had cost him something he hadn't fully finished paying. He was looking directly at the peephole, which meant he knew she was standing on the other side of it, which meant he had been standing in that corridor knowing she was looking at him through that small circle of glass and he had not moved. He was waiting. She pressed her palm flat against the door. She thought about all the things she had planned to say if this moment ever came. She had rehearsed versions of it. She had been thorough. She had been, she believed, prepared. She was not prepared. She opened the door. They looked at each other across the threshold. The silence had a quality to it she didn't have a word for. 2 years dense. Full of everything neither of them had said to each other's faces. He looked at her the way he had always looked at her, like she was the most important thing in the room and he was deciding what to do about that. Then he said, quietly, with the absolute certainty of a man who had arrived at a decision from which he had no intention of departing. You're not leaving me again. If you are gripping something right now, if your chest is doing something you weren't expecting, then you already know this is the kind of story this channel was built for. Like this video right now, if Jun-ho showing up at that door gave you something. And tell me in the comments, what do you think he knows? Does he know about Woo-jin? Does he know about the drive? Or did he come to Savannah for something else entirely? Subscribe if you haven't. Because part 2 is already being written and the people who are subscribed are the ones who will get there first. She didn't step back to let him in. He didn't step forward without being invited. They stood like that. The door opened between them, Savannah morning coming in around him, the jasmine and the light and the specific quality of a city that had been holding her carefully for 2 years. And she looked at him and understood that she had 2 options. She could manage this. She could be precise and controlled and give him nothing he hadn't already found and send him back to wherever he had come from with the professional composure that had defined every interaction they'd ever had in daylight. Or she could be honest. She had spent 2 years being careful. She stepped back. He came inside. He looked at the apartment the way he looked at everything. Taking it in fully, cataloging it, understanding it. The French doors. The coffee cup. The closed laptop on the table. The gray box she had left on the counter in her haste, which his eyes moved to and held for exactly 1 second before returning to her face. He had seen the box. She knew he had seen it. She crossed her arms. Not defensively. Structurally. How did you find me? She said. He looked at her steadily. I've known where you were for 14 months. The room rearranged itself slightly. 14 months, she said. He nodded. And you waited, she said. I was giving you what you took, he said. The distance. He paused. And I was trying to understand why you left. She looked at him. Did you? Not until 3 days ago, he said. 3 days ago. Woo-jin died 4 days ago. She did the math. Took him 1 day. He watched her do the math. He waited. She said, what happened to him? His expression didn't change. What needed to, he said. She understood that she was not going to get more than that. She understood that this was the part of his world that existed below the surface of everything visible, and that she had always known it was there, and had chosen to accept the complexity of it for reasons she had also spent 2 years trying not to examine too directly. She said, he was going to use me. I know, Jun-ho said. You know, I found Park Hyun's file 3 days ago, he said. Along with everything else Woo-jin had been building. He paused and something moved across his face. Controlled but not entirely suppressible. The specific expression of a man confronting information that has rearranged his understanding of a decision he cannot take back. He had a folder with your name on it. An emergency narrative. He looked at her. You left to protect yourself from being used as his exit. She held his gaze. And you, she said quietly. He went still. The drive, she said. The payments weren't yours. The authorization codes weren't yours. I knew that from the beginning. If Woo-jin's narrative had reached anyone official, I was the only person outside the organization with evidence that cleared you. She paused. I was his insurance that I'd be too scared to use it. I was your insurance that the truth existed somewhere. And I was the only person who could decide which one of those I was going to be. The Savannah morning came through the French doors. Junho looked at her for a long time. She watched him absorb it. She watched the 2 years of whatever he had been carrying. She did not know the full weight of it. She had only ever carried her own. Shift and reframe inside whatever understanding he had arrived at on the flight down from Chicago. You left to protect both of us, he said. It wasn't a question. She didn't answer immediately. Then she said, I left because Woo-jin gave me a choice and the only version of staying that kept you safe was one where I didn't stay. She met his eyes. I didn't tell you because you would have handled it yourself and handling it would have cost you more than losing me did. He looked at her. You don't know that, he said. She almost smiled. She didn't. I know you, she said. He stayed. Not in the way she had half feared. Not with pressure or demand or the weight of a man who had tracked her across 2 years and 2 states and believed that arrival was the same as resolution. He stayed the way he had always occupied space, with the specific gravity of someone who had decided something and was not going to perform it but simply live in it. She made coffee. He sat at her kitchen table. They talked for 3 hours. Not about the past first. About what was happening now. He told her that Woo-jin's death had triggered a restructuring of the organization's inner circle. That 3 of the shell LLCs had already been dissolved. That the investigation risk had been contained, for now, but that the federal interest in Kong Group's Chicago operations had not entirely dissipated. She needs to know something, he said. The USB drive. She waited. I'm not here for the drive, he said clearly. I want you to understand that before anything else. Whatever's on it, whatever you decide to do with it, that's yours. He met her eyes. I came here for a different reason. She looked at him. I came because I spent 14 months knowing where you were and giving you the distance, and I am done giving you the distance, he said. And I need you to tell me directly whether there is any version of this of us that you are willing to consider. Not Chicago. Not what it was before. Something different. He paused. I need to know if I wasted 14 months being respectful or if I gave you something you actually needed. She looked at him across her kitchen table in the Savannah morning light. She thought about the gray box. She thought about the drive. She thought about the 2 years of building a careful life at a deliberate distance from the thing she had wanted most. She thought about the fact that she had kept the photograph. She said, you didn't waste them. Something in his face changed. Not dramatically. Not a movie moment. The door moved slightly, the way it does when the pressure on both sides finally equalizes. But, she said. He waited. I need the drive to go somewhere safe before anything else, she said. Not with you. Not with anyone in the organization. Somewhere independently held, where it can't be used against either of us and can't be buried. She looked at him steadily. I kept it because it was the only thing that told the truth. I'm not giving that up. Not for anyone. He held her gaze. Then he nodded. Once. The nod of a man who has just been shown something that clarifies rather than complicates. Tell me what you need, he said. She told him. They spent the rest of that morning working. Not on them, on the situation. The drive. The safe deposit arrangement at a law firm she chose, independently, with a partner Junho had no existing relationship with. The documentation chain. The contacts she needed him not to touch. He did not push. He did not redirect. He sat across from her and responded to every logistical question with the precision she remembered and had missed without admitting she missed it. At 2 in the afternoon she closed her laptop. She looked at him. He looked back. There was something between them that had always been there. She had stopped pretending otherwise somewhere around the 3rd hour of the morning. That 2 years had not dissolved but had instead clarified. Stripped of the professional structure. Stripped of the late evenings and the careful boundaries and the things neither of them had said out loud until now. What was left was not less than what it had been. It was more. She said. I need you to understand something. He was listening. I'm not going back to Chicago, she said. I built something here. I'm not dismantling it. I'm not asking you to, he said. I'm not going to be adjacent to the parts of your world I can't live with, she said. I know what exists below the surface. I accepted the complexity once. I'll accept it again. But there are lines and they are not negotiable and they are not going to move because you show up at my door looking like that. A pause. Looking like what, he said. She almost smiled again. This time she let it happen. Just barely. Like something I decided to stop wanting, she said. And then didn't. He looked at her with the same expression she had first seen in a Chicago office on a Thursday morning. The one that wasn't surprise, wasn't performance, was simply recognition. The kind that doesn't announce itself because it doesn't need to. I know your lines, Amara, he said quietly. I have always known your lines. He paused. I also know that you kept the photograph. She looked at him. How do you know that, she said. Because I kept mine, he said. The Savannah afternoon settled around them. The jasmine came through the French doors. Somewhere on Jones Street a car passed and then it was quiet again. She thought about her father's rules. The structure underneath a thing is always more important than the surface. The most dangerous position is one where someone else controls the information. She had spent 2 years building a structure that was entirely her own. She had kept the information. She had kept herself. She had also, apparently, kept the photograph. She looked at Kang Joon-ho across her kitchen table in the afternoon light. This man who had arrived at her door with 2 years of distance and 14 months of restraint and the specific certainty of someone who had done the math on what he was willing to lose and arrived at a number that surprised even him. She said, "There are things we need to figure out." "I know," he said. "It's not going to be simple," she said. "It was never simple," he said. He looked at her. That wasn't the part that mattered. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "The drive goes to the lawyer today." Today, he agreed. And then, she said. He waited. She stood up. She went to the counter. She picked up the gray box. She took out the USB drive and set it on the table between them. She looked at it for a moment. 2 years of wait, 2 years of insurance, 2 years of the only true version of a story that had almost been told wrong. Then she looked up at him. And then, she said, "We figure out the rest." 3 weeks later, the drive was at the law firm. 2 partners had copies of the documentation summary. The chain of custody was clean, independent, untouchable. The federal interest in Kong Group had not disappeared, but it had shifted direction. Away from the executive level, toward the dissolved shell structures, toward the men who had operated them, none of whom were named Kong. Park Hyun resurfaced. He was in Seoul. He sent one message to the burner phone, which Amara still kept charged out of habit. "It worked out," he said, "as you always knew it would." She put the burner phone back in the gray box. She put the box back on the shelf, not at the very back this time, closer to the front. Not because she needed it, because she had decided that the things she carried for the right reasons didn't need to be hidden. Joon-ho flew back to Chicago that first week. He came back to Savannah the following Friday. He did not ask her to move. He did not restructure her life around his. He arrived with the specific quality of a man who has understood, finally and completely, that the way to keep something is not to possess it but to be worthy of it. She was at her drafting table when he arrived. She had a client meeting in an hour. She had coffee on and the French doors open and the jasmine doing what it always did. He let himself in with the key she had left under the mat. Not because she was careless, because she had decided. He came and stood behind her at the table. He looked at what she was working on. "Good proportions," he said. She kept her eyes on the plans. "I know," she said. He put a hand on her shoulder. She let him. Outside, Savannah went about its morning. The magnolias, the river light, the particular beauty of a city that has learned that the most enduring things are not the ones that survive without being tested, but the ones that are tested and choose, deliberately, clearly, with full knowledge of the cost, to remain. Amara remained. So did he. If the story held you, if Amara felt real, if Joon-ho's arrival at that door did something to you, if the moment she set the drive on the table between them hit the way I intended it to, then this channel is your home. Like this video. It takes 1 second and it tells the algorithm that stories told with this kind of honesty deserve to be seen. Subscribe if you haven't already. We are here every single week without fail. This community shows up for each other and we show up for you. And comment below. I want to know, what was the moment that got you? Was it the door? The photograph? Or was it the very last line? Tell me. I read every single one. Welcome home. See you next week.